Have you ever wondered why your team would absolutely pick up in the summer transfer window and sell its best player? I know it's absolutely annoying. I know it pisses me off too. Or teams that have billionaire owners literally telling every single fan that they cannot spend in the summer transfer window. We have already seen it with Sir Jim Ratcliffe with Manchester United this summer. It is because of three-letter words. The three-letter words that majority of fans absolutely detest, except from the top 6 sides. And even the top 6 sides absolutely are mad about this situation because they cannot do the things that they want to do anymore. And those letters are PSR. These letters are absolutely things that are dreaded by a lot of administrators, a lot of owners, and definitely a lot of fans. And today, I'm going to be breaking it down so every single person can understand what PSR is, why it was brought into the game, what we can do to fix it, and why it is affecting football currently. Without further ado, let's get this party started. PSR, let's talk about it. Now the question is, what is PSR? What does PSR stand for? And of course, for the people in the back that do not know this, it is basically profitability and sustainability rules. The Premier League's version of course, the former financial fair play. In simple terms, any 3-year period of a club, the club is only allowed to lose over £105 million. You can't lose more. You understand? You just cannot lose more. That is basically the parameters of PSR. Of that, 90 million pounds can be covered by the owner putting in money like buying shares, but definitely not loans, because we know how the Glazers do their things. This rule covers that situation from happening again. So buying shares and doing other things that you can do, and I'm going to talk about the loophole a little bit later. And then the other 15 million pounds this is the key part, it must come from the club's own revenue. That's the key part about this situation. That is what makes PSR sustainable in that sense. They want to make sure that the club itself is making enough money to sustain itself. Certainly, spending doesn't count towards loss limit. Like, how to put it? Certain spending doesn't count towards loss limit. Like money on youth academies, women's football, stadium upgrades, and community projects. Those things do not count towards the loss limit of 105. Keep in mind that amount of number, that figure right there, because it is truly the key figure to what PSR is doing in the Premier League right now. And then you look at situations like player transfer fees are spread out over the length of a contract, what we all know right now as amortization. So a £50 million player on a 5-year deal counts to around £10 million per year in the books. We have all famously seen Chelsea do a player like Moises Caicedo, but then sign them for 8-year deal. So they signed Moises Caicedo for 115 million pounds, but then they signed him for an 8-year deal. So they split it and amortize the money. So it basically counts less than that amount. And we of course have seen it the same famously this summer with Liverpool, with Florian Wirtz and Alexander Isak. You understand? If this rule is broken, right, you can see situations like fines, ban from transfers, or even point deduction. Especially like, for instance, famously, Everton that deducted 10 points. Sean Dyche, credit to him, because bro, did he ride that wave. 10 points was deducted from Liverpool, and then it was then reduced to 6 points. Of course, after that, we saw Nottingham Forest, 4 points deduction in 2023-2024. But then, famously, we also know that Chelsea had that transfer ban that they couldn't buy anybody, but because of that, they bought a lot of people the summer before. And so these are things that have happened in the past for people that have broken the rules of PSR. But like I promised you guys, I'm going to tell you guys why PSR was introduced to the team and introduced to football in general. The sales pitch for the clubs in the 2013-2014 year at that particular time was simple. Stop reckless spending or stop reckless overspending Abramovich that could bankrupt teams. Because that was something that we saw that teams did, owners did. They would spend recklessly on players that they did not have the money to replenish that situation. Protect the league's reputation after past financial collapse. Think Portsmouth. That time it was Nwankwo was there at Jemba, if I'm not mistaken. But Portsmouth had a really good side, but went bankrupt because of this situation, because of the guardrails were not placed there. And so Leeds too was example of this situation. They got relegated because of this thing. Bad ownership, bad responsibilities with the money. And so PSR was then brought into the league. This also, in their mind, it also encouraged long-term planning instead of gambling on short-term successes. The Premier League sold it as a safety net, a way to keep all 20 clubs financially healthy while allowing ambition. That was basically what they thought. But the situation is that everything could start with good intentions, but there's a lot of loopholes that you never can expect, which then causes a lot of problems. So today, right now, we are going to be talking about the problems that PSR is facing currently with the Premier League. First things first is definitely the uneven impact on smaller clubs with ambitious owners. For instance, Aston Villa, Newcastle. This hit the spending ceiling faster because their revenues are smaller than the big six. Key thing about this situation, remember, the revenue coming into the club is also quite important, because for you to spend the money of the owners, you need to also show that the club is making that much. So if the club is not making that much, you cannot spend as much. I know I said a lot of things in that situation. It is literally a tongue twister, but it's basically a balancing act. Newcastle doesn't provide the amount of money that the owners have to spend more. So they cannot spend more because Newcastle haven't gotten the money itself. Same thing with Aston Villa. And that is the problem that smaller clubs, respectfully, are having. And then you see the loopholes that are basically being exploited for the likes of Chelsea, that has literally shone a huge light on this PSR rules. The loopholes. Some clubs use creative accounting, like selling assets to related companies. For instance, Chelsea selling their hotel and even selling their women's team to the parent company that owns Chelsea. They still own it, but this time there's an influx of money from the club from selling its assets. These things are becoming loopholes that are really annoying to the likes of Newcastle, are really annoying to the rest of the league. And then you look at timing games. Clubs rush to sell their players before June 30th to make the books look better. Not just that, they also sell the academy players, which is what absolutely is the sad part about it. You sell your academy players, and players that are meant to be celebrated for their hard work and getting into the first team are usually meant to be the bedrock of the team, because usually they come from that particular part of the city. For instance, Kobe Mainoo, Cobham, Manchester United. They come close. They are literally fans of the team, and they play for the team, and it's basically the soul of the academy. And then they get sold because it brings a better profitability from the club because it's selling its assets. And then you also have the legal tensions. Manchester City are challenging a related party transaction rules with the PFA that has threatened legal actions over this exact system. Examples of this situation is Everton overspent, got docked points twice in 2 seasons. Nottingham Forest breached limits after promotions, lost 4 points. Leicester City charged after losing £201 million over 3 years. These are problems for younger sides, but this is basically the negative part and the problems that are facing these teams. And then let's look at the positives and negatives of PSR. First things, we'll start with the positives. It stops clubs from going bust chasing glory. Because that's definitely one thing that we saw Portsmouth do. They won the FA Cup and the next thing, fell. Because they couldn't pay their players. Because they literally did not have money coming into the club. Encourages investment in youth facilities, youth themselves, and the women's football. And of course, last but not least, it creates some financial discipline in the transfer market. But then now let's look at the negative, because I know that's what you guys are here for. It can absolutely freeze ambitions of mid-table clubs with wealthy owners. PS, Aston Villa, Newcastle. Big clubs with huge revenues can outspend every single person. Remember, the revenue is coming from the club. But then with the revenue higher, the owners can put more on top. That's the key. That's the balancing act that is the problem. Loopholes mean that the richest can still bend the rules. Fans see selling to survive instead of building stronger squads. Those are things that are absolutely negatives that PSR came with. Now, these are my options. These are my predictions on how to fix PSR. I literally have 6 options with an honorable mention. And that honorable mention is going to come in the last part of the video. So guys, make sure you guys hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button, and make sure you stay to the end so you know what I think would be able to fix this problem. First things first, option 1 is switch to squad cost ratio. Squad cost ratio. That particular fact is basically already being trailed in this situation. Caps spending on wages, transfer, and agent fees to around 85% of the revenue, 70% if in Europe. So it gives you incentive to become good enough to be in Europe so you can bring down that cap. That's one option. We have seen them do it in the NBA with the whole second apron thing. And then this situation, of course, then aligns with the UEFA rules, which could then be more fairer to smaller clubs. Option 2, adjust the PSR threshold by club size. This is a key thing. Let smaller clubs' revenue spend a higher percentage of turnover to close the gap. If your club makes a certain amount, if there's a threshold that your club is making, that means the percentage of your owners can go higher a little bit. If you pass that, the percentage of your owners drops. If you pass that, the percentage of your owners putting money drops. This is another option that might not be favorite to the Big Six side, but definitely will balance the gap that we are seeing from the Big Six and the rest of the league. Number 3, stricter loophole controls. Ban or limit intra-group sales and enforce a fair market value on all related party deals. For instance, instead of us being able to sell the women's team, there should be a limit to how much you can sell it. There should be a limit to why you want to sell it. And there should be literally proof to us understanding why we have to sell it, in my mind. There should be a reasoning. It should not be, I'm selling it to myself because I want to be able to buy more players for the men's team. It should at least have a correlation to making sure that the women's team is also growing and also benefiting from the sale. Option 4, longer compliance windows. Move it from 3 years to 4 or 5 years. Rolling periods to give clubs more flexibility in squad building. One thing is for sure, 3 years, that 3-year window is so tight. I do not believe that in 3 years you will be able to build a Premier League winning side. I've always believed that it has to go with 4 to 5 years. So you can absolutely say whatever we do can affect each and every part of our starting 11 and the bench without falling into the situation where we have this problem. I believe that is also something that we can add into the flexibility rules and just be more flexible in the PSR, just to allow teams be able to squad build and not have to lose their best player in order for them to bring 2 more players. And then number 5 is a hybrid model. Keep PSR loss limits, but add a wage to revenue cap to stop reckless spending without killing ambition. You understand? Basically, this is self-explanatory. Your wages, your revenue. Your wages, your revenue. It just has to fluctuate in a way that it is controlled, and you're showing that the clubs itself can manage without any owner putting any money into it. The club itself can be successful without any owner putting money. For example, the Green Bay Packers famously do not have an owner. It is owned by the people. And how do they navigate their own spending? Because they just signed Micah Parsons to the biggest deal. I think it's $144 million for a non-quarterback with a $120 million guarantee on signing. How do they do that? The club itself, Green Bay Packers, make a certain amount of money. And with that amount of money, they are able to tally out the wages to players on the team. And that is basically it. They do not have any billionaire from Qatar coming to put money into the Green Bay Packers. It is what the Green Bay Packers make, that is what they spend. And that is basically it. And now this is also a key thing. It's an honorable mention. Just an honorable mention, because I think it's something that we need to bring into the game. And that is having young players that are academy players, their wages be deductibles. Deductibles in the sense that if they come into the team, this is also encouraging teams to keep their academy players. Whatever wage they have should not be counted as a loss. It should then go into the loss column as a credit, because you're deducting that particular part, giving clubs incentive to keep the likes of Conor Gallagher, who is a Cobham graduate, to keep the likes of Chalobah, that was almost about to be sold, to keep the likes of Alfie Gilchrist, that was sold, to keep the likes of Garnacho, Scott McTominay, Reece Nelson. Those academy players are truly the bedrock on the soul of those clubs and how they are tied to the fans. And I feel like if you do that, you will definitely find a way to incentivize the club to keep the academy players, plus giving them the ability to spend more money in the market because they got a deductible by one person coming into the academy. Now, I am not a financial expert, so maybe these things I'm saying don't really make too much sense, but I believe that when you do this, the incentives and the positives gets better. And of course, you can always just scrap PSR. But then you're basically opening the Premier League to the Wild Wild West. The way we saw Man City gets better. The way we saw Chelsea get better. An oligarch comes in and splash a lot of money and buys success. We do not want that in the Premier League. I think the majority of us can say that. But I feel we need to review it, just like what Emery said. We need to review it and we need to get better and making sure the Premier League continues to be very, very ambitious and competitive. Let me know what you guys think about this down in the comment. Make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that follow button. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.